Phone the International Helpline for Abortion Recovery at 866-482-LIFE. Your call is confidential, and you'll be talking with someone who's already been where you are and found the way out. 866-482-LIFE.
Immigration is the fault and all of the problems that we're having, because we cannot get them to sign legislation. We cannot get them even to the negotiating table. And I say it's very strongly the Democrats' fault.
The number of aliens illegally crossing with children went from 14,000 to 75,000 in just 4 years.
Those who selectively use the Bible to justify this cruelty are ignoring a central tenet of Christianity.
You look at what's happening in Europe, we can't allow that to happen to the United States, not on my watch.
This is the United States of America. It isn't Nazi Germany.
A country without borders is not a country at all.
We do not want to separate children from their parents. We do not want adults to bring children into this country unlawfully either.
I went to a lot of years of Sunday school.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on Conservative Talk Radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
And a howdy to all of you. A little greeting from my home region of the West. Glad to have you in the conversation today. The program is Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on Conservative Talk Radio. And I am your congenial, convivial, and amiable host, Brian Fisher. Glad to have you in the conversation
as always
today. As always. Forgot that. Of course, we'll have to ask the executive producer if that's accurate. I'm always congenial, convivial, amiable, and effervescent.
You are in the hours between 1 and 3 Central Time.
That's right. I can crank it up. I can crank it up 2 hours a day. Anyway, glad to have you in the conversation. A lot we're going to get to today. We're going to focus on the hearing today of Michael Horowitz, who was the Inspector General that produced the IG's report on the Mueller investigation. We're going to spend a considerable amount of time on that, and we're going to talk about this fracas on the border about the separation of immigrant children from the parents. We're going to set you straight on that. By the time you get done today, you're going to have a straight-up understanding of what's going on the border and why what the Trump administration is doing is what the law requires and why it is not inhumane and not heartless and not cruel. So we're going to get to that as the program develops. Now, before we get into all of that, we want to turn our attention to the Word of God. We're in the last section of the Gospel of John today, chapter 21, verses 15 through 25. And this is that famous exchange where Jesus asks Peter 3 times, "Do you love me?" And, of course, every time Peter says, "Yes, Lord, I do love you," on the third time Peter says, "Look, Lord, you know everything. You see into my heart. You know that I love you." And each time Jesus says, "Tend my sheep," or "Feed my sheep," or "Tend my lambs." Now, I don't attach any significance to the difference in the way the questions are phrased and the difference in the directions that Jesus gives to Peter. There are different Greek words that are used. I don't attach any significance to them, just telling you as an interpreter. Some teachers of the Scripture will make a big deal out of that, and they'll draw little intricate lessons from the difference in the Greek words. I don't. John is quite fond of using synonyms in his writings, and so I think each time he says to Peter, "Do you love me?" And Peter says, "Yes, I do." And he says, "Feed my sheep." "Peter, do you love me?" "Yes, I do, Lord." "Then tend my sheep." "Peter, do you love me?" He says, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I do." And he says, "Feed my sheep." So the question is, what is going on here? There's different words for love that are used. Agape for the first two, philea for the third. Some people think, well, Jesus is lowering the standard on love so Peter can qualify. Not any of that going on, I don't believe. These are all synonyms for each other. The question is very simple. Do you love me? The answer is very simple. Yes, I do. And the result, or the final word in each case was feed my sheep. Now, why did Jesus ask Peter 3 times to publicly affirm his love for him? Well, I think you probably figured that out. It's because 3 times Peter had publicly denied Jesus. And Peter realizes what Jesus is up to when he asks him for the 3rd time, because it says in verse 17, Peter was grieved because he said to him the 3rd time, "Do you love me?" And that's when Peter knew for a fact that Jesus was going back to the 3 denials. Remember, Jesus looked right in his eyeballs after Peter denied the Lord for the 3rd time and the rooster crowed. Jesus looked down with piercing gaze, looked right into Peter's eyes, and he broke down and wept on the spot. So Jesus wanted to reassure him. And here's what Jesus was doing, I think. I've mentioned this before. Some of you probably heard me say this, but here's what I think was going on. It's like they're on the beach. This is after they've had the fish for breakfast, after Jesus barbecued them up for them. It was like there was this huge whiteboard that was set up on the beach. And each one of Peter's 3 denials was on that board as a big black mark next to his name. 3 monster black mark demerits right next to his name. And then it is as if each time Peter publicly affirms his love for Jesus, Jesus goes to the whiteboard, takes a giant eraser, and removes the black marks one by one until the board is spotless, to let Peter know that he is forgiven, every demerit is wiped away. And now what Jesus says to Peter, now I want you to get busy about doing the task I've assigned to you to feed my sheep. So I know I'm talking to some of you out there. You've had some pretty major blowouts in your life, and you know you sin pretty grievously against God. You don't sugarcoat it. You don't justify it. You don't try to pretend it was something else. You know that you screwed up royally, and you wonder if God can ever use you. You think you've disqualified yourself from service. Well, I want you to think about Peter's example, because right now all Jesus wants to know from you is if you love him. And I'll guarantee you, if you are troubled by what you did, that's an indication, that is a sign that you do in fact love Jesus. So declare your love for him, confess your sin once again, accept his forgiveness, picture him wiping that whiteboard completely clean, and then get back to following him, doing whatever he's asked you to do in your life. Now, the last thing is when Jesus says to Peter in this passage, verse 19, when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go. And John says he did this to show by what kind of death he was to glorify God. Now, this prophecy was fulfilled 34 years later when Peter was crucified in Rome. Stretched out his hands, he had garments put on him, and he was carried where he did not want to go, and that was to the place of crucifixion. And Peter asked to be crucified upside down because he did not consider himself worthy to be crucified as Jesus was. And then he asks a question of John, what about this man? And Jesus says, if it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? You follow me. And John says, from this enigmatic statement from Jesus, the rumor began to circulate that John was never going to die until Jesus came back. And John's anxious to say, no, that's not what he said. He only said, if it is my will that he remains. So they had fake news in the first century as well. Well, let's go to the Lord in prayer together. Lord Jesus, we thank you so much for your tender and yet painful restoration of Peter. He had denied you 3 times, and so you gave him opportunity 3 times to affirm his love for you. Each time he declared his love for you, you wiped away one of his denials until none were left, and he finished the conversation with you, fully restored to you, and fully restored to ministry. Peter affirmed, Lord, that you know all things, and we know that you do. And so we know that you know our heart. And even though we often fail you, our heart is to love you and to follow you and to feed your sheep in whatever way you want us to. You made it clear to Peter that love for you is to find expression in love for others. And so I pray for myself, for my family, for the listening audience of Focal Point, everyone within the sound of my voice right now, for every man, woman, and child in our land, including our president, President Trump. And I pray that we all may know clearly how you want us to feed your sheep and shepherd your lambs. I pray that you will show each of us how you have gifted us so that we may minister to others. We affirm that John's testimony about you from the beginning of this gospel to the end is true. In your name, amen.
The following is not an actor, but a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
I had a lot of credit card debt and I couldn't pay my bills. I was feeling so bad. I got to a point where I needed some help. So I reached out and contacted Trinity.
If you're in debt and you need help, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813 to talk to a certified counselor.
They were able to take all of my different payments and put them all together.
Trinity will consolidate your accounts into one easy-to-manage monthly payment, put a stop to late fees and over-limit charges, reduce your interest, and possibly improve your credit score. You'll save thousands.
And they were actually able to work with my creditors. I've been able to pay off close to $15,000 in the last 18 months.
If your debt has you down, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
My name is Stephanie, and I'm debt-free for keeps.
1-800-788-1813.
Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. Romans 12:2. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. Paul's epistle to the Romans was written to believers. This verse highlights the fact that it's possible for Christians to be conformed to the world's ways. The word conform there means to be squeezed into the mold of another. Rather than being squeezed into the world's mold, the Lord requires us to be transformed by having our minds renewed by God's word. Everything about us must be held up to the light of Scripture, and wherever there's any discrepancy, we must be transformed.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner with Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio. And we were talking about the final chapter of the Gospel of John and Jesus' interaction with Peter. And one of the things that Jesus tells Peter is, Peter says, look, you're telling me what's going to happen to me. Others are going to dress me. They're going to stretch out my arms. I'm going to be taken to where I don't want to go, which is a reference to his death by crucifixion. And so he says to Jesus, well, what about John? What's going to happen to him? And Jesus basically says very simply, that's none of your business. He says, that's between me and John. What happens to him, that's between me and him. What I want you to concentrate on is just following me. I think it's a very important thing for us to do in life because it's pointless for us to start comparing ourselves to other people. Nobody is walking exactly the same path that we are walking. Nobody is facing the same obstacles, the same hindrances, the same challenges that you and I have to face. Sometimes it seems to us that other people are just skating through life, that God has just paved their pathway and provided health and wealth and success, and we're struggling along trying to get to the end of the month. We're dealing with health issues. We're dealing with behavioral issues with our children. We're dealing with pressure at work, and we compare ourselves to others that seem to have it so easy, and it's easy to begin to feel a little sorry for ourselves and even to get a little bit bitter and maybe even resentful toward God about the way that he's handled our lives. You know, there's a passage in one of the Narnia Chronicles. I don't remember where it was or who it was, but one of the kids in the Narnia Chronicles asked Aslan, Aslan's talking to him about his future, and he asked Aslan, what about this other guy? I mean, Edmund asking about Peter or something like that. And Aslan says very simply, that's not your story. You know, what I do with him, that's not your story. That's not about you. That's not any of your business. You got your hands full just keeping your focus on me, following me, and doing what I have asked you to do. So that's God's word to us. If you are tempted to be envious of someone or jealous, put that in the back of your mind. Reject those thoughts. Those are from Satan. So reject them out loud, because Satan's not going to go anywhere unless you rebuke him orally, rebuke those thoughts out loud, and then reset your mind to following Christ and doing what he has asked you to do. Now, I got a little interesting story. I teased it with the guys at the top of the hour, but I've got a story here about a guy that hit a major league home run before he was even in the major leagues. And you think, what is this, time travel? What is this? Well, here is how it happened. It's a guy by the name of Juan Soto. He's playing for the Washington Nationals, just was called up just recently. And his debut in the National League, he was in the lineup for the continuation of a game that was disrupted by weather back on May 15. So the game actually started on May 15. It continued. I don't know exactly the date it continued. I don't know. But anyway, it continued when the two teams faced each other again, whenever the schedule brought them back together again. So the game resumed at the place it had been stopped by weather. And this is Soto's debut game, one of his first trips to the plate. He hits a home run. So technically, you go to the record books, and he hit that home run on May 15, because that's when the game started. And as far as the records are concerned, the record books are concerned, he hit that home run on May 15. He wasn't even in the major leagues until May 24. So that is our little Fisher factoid of the day.
That's a neat one.
Yeah, you should have saved that for Friday trivia.
Yeah, because I just couldn't hold on to that one.
You had to
too
go.
Good. Yeah, I couldn't hang on to that one. And it has happened before. Dave Parker, who was an all-star, and Barry Bonds, obviously has a home run record, also recorded hits in the continuation of games that were started prior to them making their debut. So back to the future with Major League Baseball.
Great trivia question.
Yeah, that's kind of a cool little story, isn't it? All right, well, we got a ton of stuff, and I don't even know where to start, but I think I'm going to start with the hearing this morning with Michael Horowitz, who is the author of the investigative report. He's the Inspector General for the Department of Justice. He's the one that authored the report on the investigations into Hillary and her email fiasco and the Trump-Russia investigation. He's the one that wrote the deal. So that was the focus. He was called before the House today to be interviewed about his investigative general report. And the guy that was just livid, and rightfully so in my judgment, was Trey Gowdy. And he's livid because at the end of the report, and I listened to a little bit of the testimony this morning as much as I could while doing show prep, because I was tracking down guys that hit home runs before they got in the major league. I was busy working hard. So, but anyway, the Democrats,
which news site do you actually come across those kind of stories, Brian?
And ESPN? No, not ESPN. CBS. It's Fox News. It's CNN. Whatever. Right. But anyway, the Democrats on this Judiciary Committee. I mean, there were 74 lawmakers there out of 435 people in the House of Representatives. It was pretty good. A lot of them wanted to get in on the action. So if they were on a committee that made them eligible to be in this hearing, they were there. So that hearing is just going to go on forever. But Trey Gowdy started off, and what the Democrats are clinging to, this is their lifeline, is the statement that there was no documented evidence of bias in the actions of the Department of Justice, that Michael Horowitz could not detect any particular instance in which bias directly affected the decisions that were made. This is absolute hogwash. It's horsepucky. And Trey Gowdy calls him out on this. I've got some excerpts from his opening statement today, and he just rips into this report. I didn't have time to look at all of his or load up all of his interactions with Inspector General Horowitz about bias, but we'll hear Trey Gowdy's view of bias. He says you can't have it. It's intolerable on the part of anybody who's responsible for the administration of justice. You cannot have bias anywhere in the system. And he says, there is no attorney that would ever let a juror on a jury panel who manifested evident bias. You just don't put them in charge of dealing with issues of justice because they're biased. They can't help it. It's going to affect their way they think and the votes that they make and the decisions they make. So Trey Gowdy says, look, you just can't have anybody on your team that's got manifest bias and let them stay in place. So here is Trey Gowdy. This is from his opening statement this morning, opening this hearing with Michael Horowitz being the guy on the hot seat.
This Inspector General's report should conjure anger, disappointment, and sadness in everyone who reads it. This IG report lays bare the bias, the animus, the prejudging of facts by senior FBI agents and senior attorneys. And bias and fairness cannot coexist. And that is why no lawyer seated up here today would ever allow a biased juror to sit on his or her jury. And no citizen would ever allow a biased police officer or judge to work on any matter of any significance. There is a presumption that bias is bad, and that is a presumption we should accept in nearly every single facet of life. As we read this report, we're reminded of Jim Comey's decision to hold the July 5th press conference and appropriate the charging decision away from the prosecutors. We see Jim Comey drafting an exoneration memo before important witnesses, like the target, were even interviewed. Ironically, this Inspector General has been accused of softening or watering down his report, when the reality is it was Jim Comey who softened and watered down his press release announcing no charges against Secretary Clinton. We see Jim Comey and Jim Comey alone deciding which DOJ policies to follow and which to ignore. We see Jim Comey and Jim Comey alone deciding whether there is sufficient evidence to support each and every element of an offense. We see Jim Comey and Jim Comey alone deciding whether to send a letter to Congress in the throes of a looming election.
So Jim Comey and Jim Comey alone deciding which DOJ policies to follow and which ones to ignore, appointing himself judge, jury, and executioner, sending in an effort to get people prosecuted and sent to jail. Now here's what Jonathan Turley says. This is clip 10. Let's jump down to clip 10, Rob. This is Jonathan Turley, who's a law professor at, I think, George Washington or George Mason School of Law. Anyway, a leading legal beagle on the nation landscape on cable networks all the time, giving expert legal opinion. And, he makes a comment here because, remember, all that Mueller is talking about now is obstruction. All that anybody's talking about is obstruction. It was Russia, Russia, Russia. Then it was collusion, collusion, collusion. Couldn't find any evidence on either of those fronts. So then it was obstruction, obstruction, obstruction. And it's based on his firing of Comey. All the people that are out there hollering about Trump being guilty of obstruction of justice are basing it on the fact that he fired Comey. And here's what Jonathan Turley says is a result now of this Inspector General's report.
To me, the obstruction claim involving Comey was always difficult, but after the IG, it's become virtually incomprehensible because the IG said that Comey was insubordinate, that he deviated from policies, he violated FBI policies. All those are a good reason to fire James Comey. And so the problem that's going to come up for the critics of President Trump is that this dog just won't hunt when you've got both the IG and the Deputy Attorney General saying he deserved to be fired.
So he's saying, look, you can forget it. If the concept of obstruction of justice comes up, forget about it. It's not going to happen because you have the Inspector General and the Deputy Attorney General, that's Rod Rosenstein. He wrote the letter justifying Comey's firing. That wasn't Trump that wrote that letter. That was Rod Rosenstein, who was the Deputy Attorney General. So both of them are saying, look, what Comey did, he did stuff that's beyond the pale. He absolutely deserved to be fired. So Donald Trump was right when he said, I did the nation a service by firing James Comey. The guy was bent. He was badly bent. And his bias was corrupting his investigation. It was corrupting his work as the director of the FBI. And so Trump did absolutely the right thing. He was eminently fireable. That was his constitutional. He had the constitutional authority to do it because Trump and Trump alone is the head of the Justice Department. Everybody in the Justice Department, everybody in the executive branch starting with the Attorney General, starting with the head of the FBI, every single one of them, they serve at Trump's pleasure. He has the authority, he has the right to fire anybody that he wants to at any time for any reason. So no longer possible to make an obstruction case against Trump. We'll be right back.
This is Dr. Richard Land, president of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Welcome to Bringing Everything Captive. Last week, the Center for Disease Control released a new report showing that suicide rates in the United States are increasing at an alarming rate. Between 1999 and 2016, suicide rates went up by more than 30% in half the nation. Designer Kate Spade and celebrity chef Anthony Bourdain, two of the latest high-profile celebrities to commit suicide, are in one of the highest risk groups for suicide, those between 55 and 64. People are asking why would successful and rich celebrities like Kate Spade and Anthony Bourdain commit suicide. They had found everything to live for, especially wealth and fame, the reigning idols of secular America, or at least some people think. Why indeed? Why is suicide rising so alarmingly in the most affluent nation on earth? There are several reasons. One is anxiety and mood disorders, undiagnosed often, mental disorders. But these, like suicide itself, are symptoms and not answers, not causes. One big reason is the internet. We've seen an alarming rise in suicide rates in conjunction with the internet and social media becoming ubiquitous in American life. It leads to isolation, it breeds bullying, and it makes people feel more alone. But let's face it, folks, it all comes down to what the famous philosopher Pascal said. There is inside man a God-shaped vacuum, and only God can fill it. When we keep trying to feed our souls with money, fame, celebrity, sexual fulfillment, drugs, we're going to become spiritually malnourished. God created us for fellowship with Him, and if we don't have that fellowship with Him, we're going to feel lonely. We're going to feel unfulfilled. We're going to find that all the false gods do not bring the satisfaction, and they do not fulfill the spiritual craving of our soul. If you know someone who needs help, have them contact Bible-believing Christians. We have the answer. It's Jesus.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio. Listen to the audio podcast or download today's program at afr.net. You can also read Brian Fisher's columns at afa.net.
Welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. Brian Fisher, you're listening to Focal Point, the home of Ultra 4K radio, ultra high definition radio. More content per cubic inch of air than any other place on your radio dial. At least that is our goal. Now, the big takeaway from the first segment today of the program is that the obstruction case against Trump is dead. It's done. It's toast. It's history. It's in the archives. It's buried. That's what Jonathan Turley was saying, and I think it's an important thing. Let's lock that down. Let's lock that down and tuck it away. There is no possible case that you can make against Donald Trump for obstruction of justice. It does not exist. It's gone. Because it all hinged on his firing of James Comey. That's what the left was frothing at the mouth about. He obstructed justice by firing Comey because he was trying to protect his own hide. Well, that wasn't the problem. And Trump had every right to fire him. No obstruction of justice there. What Comey had done professionally eminently justified him being terminated as the director of the FBI. Now, here is clip number 2. This is R2. This is, again, Trey Gowdy, his opening statement this morning in the hearing with Michael Horowitz. Listen to this.
They prejudged the outcome of the Hillary Clinton investigation before the investigation ended, and these exact same FBI agents and attorneys prejudged the outcome of the Russia investigation before it even began. If prejudging the outcome of an investigation before it ends and prejudging the outcome of an investigation before it begins is not evidence of outcome determinative bias, for the life of me, I don't know what would be. That is textbook bias. It is quite literally the definition of bias, allowing something other than the facts to determine your decision. These agents were calling her president before she was even interviewed. They were calling for the end of the Trump campaign before the investigation even began. They were calling for impeachment simply because he happened to be elected. That is bias. And with all due respect, it's the FBI's job, not mine, to prove that bias can ever be harmless. Because I don't agree. I think bias is always harmful.
And I think you and I would agree with Trey Gowdy. It is always harmful because you need people that are responsible to administer justice. They've got one concern and one concern alone. What is just in this situation? Remember, Lady Justice wears the blindfold. She can't see who's in front of her. She doesn't know what party they belong to. She doesn't know what race they are. She doesn't know what ethnicity. All she's concerned about are their behavior, their actions, and whether their actions were justified according to the law or were unjustified according to the law. That's all that justice, that's all that Lady Justice cares about. That's all the FBI ought to care about. And Trey Gowdy says they weren't. You know, the people that interviewed Hillary Clinton back in July 2, 4 days before they interviewed her, they were referring to her as the president in the text that they were exchanging, already referring to her as president. Then they're supposed to go in there and interview her, and there wasn't one single question. I think about the Russian investigation, wasn't one single question of Hillary Clinton about, I forget exactly what the issue was, but there was an issue that was a prominent legal issue at the time. Not even one question about that. No 302s, FBI, no 302 reports filed away. I didn't record it, so it's just all a matter of what they happen to remember. You know, in Trey Gowdy's point, look, if an attorney would not allow a juror to sit on a jury, if that juror was biased, if you could detect during voir dire, you could detect manifest bias talking to that juror, you're going to dismiss that juror, and if you don't, the judge probably will, because that's just simply not acceptable. So what Gowdy's saying here is they had determined the Hillary's guilt or innocence before the investigation of her was over. We've talked about this before, but remember, James Comey started drafting his exoneration letter of Hillary Clinton before 17 witnesses had even been interviewed. Before 17 witnesses had even been interviewed, including Hillary Clinton, the most important witness of them all. And remember, Lisa Page was saying to Peter Strzok, who was in that interview, look, you better be careful with her. Don't go in there loaded for bear because she's probably going to be the next president. And she'll take it out on your hide if you go hard on her. As far as Trump goes, go ahead and get loaded for bear for him. Take that guy out, take him down. But when it comes to Hillary, she's the next president. Better be careful going in there. So, so they'd already prejudged the outcome of that before it was concluded. And the point that Trey Gowdy made is the day after Bob Mueller was appointed as special prosecutor, in this case, special counsel, it was Peter Strzok, I believe, that sent out an email or a text that was hypercritical of Donald Trump. I mean, the day after. Like, this guy can't be president, shouldn't be president, should not be allowed to be president. The day after, before the investigation had even started, he'd already prejudged Donald Trump's guilt. So you just got this hopelessly biased deal here. And I'm telling you, if justice was going to be done, what they would do is they would toss out everything that Bob Mueller has done. I mean, this is fruit of the poison tree on steroids, because there's not one part of that investigation that was justified. You know, it was based on this Steele dossier, which is phony, trumped up, nothing verified, completely unsubstantial. Even James Comey himself said it was not only salacious, it was unverified. And the rules in the FBI is you don't turn in a warrant to anybody, especially if it's involving surveillance that involves American citizens, unless you know that every single thing that you're submitting to the court can be verified and is backed up with good evidence. And James Comey himself said we had nothing like that with the Steele dossier, and that was the whole basis of getting the warrant that started this whole thing. Well, they've got a deal in jurisprudence about the fruit of the poison tree. In other words, if you get evidence in an illegal search, you can't use that. And everything you find in that illegal search and everything that may be connected to what you find in that illegal search cannot be admitted in a court of law. So this entire thing, in my judgment, the whole thing is a fruit of the poison tree. The whole thing ought to be tossed out. We ought to get Manafort out of change, get him out of jail. We ought to give Michael Flynn his job back. We ought to they got a couple of other guys that have been convicted, pled guilty. Let's let those Russian guys go. I mean, Mueller's going to have to do that anyway because he's got nothing on those guys. He was appalled when they showed up, freaked him out because he was figuring they'd never show up to defend themselves, and they did. And that demands that he's got to give them discovery, everything he's got on them. Well, he's got nothing on them. He's got bupkis on them. So, and he doesn't want to reveal it. So he's not going to have any choice, I don't think, but to withdraw those charges against those guys. So that's 16 of the guys that Mueller was trying to make trouble for legally are going to be let completely off the hook. All right, here is clip number 3. This is Trey Gowdy, and he uses a strong word at the end of this clip, but it's not a profanity. He's using it for emphasis. Let's listen.
Respect for the rule of law is the thread that holds the tapestry of this country together. And it depends upon you having confidence in those you empower to enforce the law. And importantly, do not ever accept the notion that those victimized or impacted or negatively treated because of bias or prejudgment have any burden of proving harm. Bias is intrinsically harmful. It is the making up of your mind based on anything other than the facts. We use a blindfolded woman holding a set of scales to symbolize what we want in a justice system. And there is nothing more antithetical to justice than lowering that blindfold and making up your mind based on who is standing in front of you. That is not who we are. That is not what we should ever become. There is a saying in the courtroom, may justice be done though the heavens fall. You won't hear that saying in politics. You're more likely to hear, let's win at all costs, the heavens be damned. We can survive with politicians we don't trust. We can't survive with a justice system we don't trust.
That's pretty powerful words. He's saying that respect for the rule of law is the thread that holds our entire society together. You know, one of the reasons why Mexico is so poor, it's very simple. The reason they are so poor is they have no respect for the rule of law in the country of Mexico. There's no functioning justice system there. So if somebody comes and steals from you something you've worked your whole life to build, you have no recourse. The gangs will come and take it, politically corrupt politicians will come and take it, and you have no place to go. You have no appeal. There's no respect for the rule of law. You cannot have a functioning economy, for instance, without the rule of law being enforced. That's what enables us to live in our communities in peace and all that kind of stuff. By the way, a plurality now of voters say that the Mueller probe has been handled unfairly. This is from Morning Consult. Let's see. Morning Consult, 53% now saying they view the lead Russia investigator in an unfavorable light. That's Mueller. That's a 26% spike since July. 40% of voters say this investigation has been handled unfairly. Back in February, it was at 34%, so that's up 6% since February. So the American people are getting onto the deal that this is a bad batch of business here. And by the way, the Attorney General confirmed yesterday that James Comey is under investigation for mishandling confidential information. And you remember this deal about some of the memos that he wrote about his interactions with President Trump. And remember, he released these memos to the media, gave them to his friend at Columbia, and with instructions to release those memos to the media. And he admitted quite openly that his entire purpose for doing that was to trigger a special counsel investigation. That was the reason he did it. But it was classified information. 2 of those memos had information that's technically classified as secret. So therefore, he mishandled confidential, secret information. That is a felony. This is the one that Hillary Clinton is in gross violation of, committed who knows how many felonies, because she had all that information on a non-secure laptop, had a bunch of it transferred to Huma Abedin. She transfers it to Anthony Weiner. So this guy that has no security clearance at all is a pedophile headed to prison. This guy has confidential memos on his laptop. And who knows where his laptop had been. And Hillary apparently is going to skate on it. So at least 2 of the memos that he shared with his friend, according to Fox News article I'm looking at here, contained information that is now deemed to be classified. And he shared those memos with the intention of leaking to the press, which again is a crime. So he mishandled the information. He leaked to the press, and again, that is a bad piece of business. And they were FBI property. He was making the memos on FBI computer sitting in an FBI car. We'll be back with your calls. Stay with us. Be right back.
The AFA Journal covers critical contemporary issues that American families care about. Here's Rusty Benson.
Number your days. It's basically about the stewardship of our time here on earth in light of eternity, and it's particularly aimed at parents. I think it's a where the rubber meets the road topic. Hopefully it'll be a perspective-keeping article for our parents.
Sign up for a free one-year subscription to the AFA Journal at afajournal.org.
Who is God? What is He like? How can we know? Your answer to these questions will impact your worship, discipleship, apologetics, and evangelism. Learn from Ravi Zacharias, Josh McDowell, Chip Ingram, and more than 60 other speakers at Southern Evangelical Seminary's 25th Annual National Conference on Christian Apologetics. It's October 12th and 13th in Charlotte, North Carolina. Get the early bird discount when you register by August 1st at ses.edu.
A Moment of Truth with Gary Bryden, Executive Director of the Association of Independent Methodists.
Someone knows all about you. Every now and then we hear of data breaches and hacks with large mainstream social media, credit bureaus, state and federal accounts that result in private information being made public. Information that is meant only for friends, family, business, government, or banking accounts is compromised. Often, people feel exposed. As bad as that is, there is one who knows everything about you, including your deepest and most private thoughts. There's coming a day when that will be revealed. The Bible says, "For all must appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that everyone receive things done in his body according to that he has done, good or bad."
The Association of Independent Methodists, like-minded congregations doing together what can't be done separately. Visit aim2020.com.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Welcome back to Focal Point. Brian Fisher is my name. Number to call if you want to join our conversation about the Mueller investigation, about this hearing this morning, about justice, about how this whole investigation has been handled. Love to get your reactions, your comments, your questions. Number to call is 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. Let's start the phone calls off with John in Carbondale, Illinois. John, welcome. What's on your mind?
Yeah, thank you, Brian, for taking my call. If you would allow me to comment on another topic that's hot in America about the children that the Democrats and our political party, both sides, is talking about. Would you allow me to comment on that?
Yeah, that's fine, because I'm going to spend most of the second hour on that topic, so go ahead. You can introduce us to it.
Okay. All right. Here's these children that are coming over into America. Can we classify that as child trafficking? And I have another comment. And when an American takes an underage child across state lines, aren't they brought up on charges of kidnapping?
Yeah, that's a federal offense to do that, to transport a child across state lines. And you make a good point, John, and that's one of the issues here. A lot of these children are being smuggled or trafficked. We'll talk about this a little bit more in the second hour, but a lot of these children aren't even with their parents. They're with adults, traffickers or other adults, coyotes or whatever, and they know that if they show up at the border with a child and they claim that child is their child, that juvenile, that child is their own child, the chances of getting past, getting put in some place where they got a chance to stay much, much higher. So you got a lot of that going on. We got some of the statistics, and we'll look at that in the second hour, John. But you're right, all kinds of criminal activity here involving helpless little children, and the ones that are the big offenders are those that are protecting this, that are complaining about securing our borders and punishing those who break our immigration laws. Okay, John, very good call. Thank you for that. Let's go to David in Lafayette, Louisiana. Welcome. What's on your mind?
Hey, Brian.
Hey.
Yeah, at first I thought it was hilarious, but it's actually pathetic. You know, when all this Russia investigation began, all you heard from the Democrats was, you know, we're going to do this investigation and we're going to follow the leads wherever they go, and, you know, justice will be served. Well, here it is. The light is shined on them, breaking the law continuously, and now they're playing circle the wagons. You know, there's a stupid person in the room, and I really don't think it's us. I hate to say that, but you know, let's be real. You know, there has to be grown-ups. And Trey Gowdy, you know, he's made some missteps in the recent future, in the recent past. You know, but his future with us, as far as getting this country back online, we need him. I wish he wouldn't get out of service right now, you know, until all of this is at least straightened out.
Yeah. Okay, David, I appreciate that. Well, he'll be in his position till the end of the year. He's not planning to run for re-election, but so we'll still have him around, and he's out there kind of taking names out there right now. And so you're right, we need him to stick around. So I appreciate the call, and you know he's exactly right. I mean, this investigation, this Inspector General's report, I mean, this has exposed the Democrats for exactly who they are and what they are. They're tainted, they're bent, they're corrupt. They are trying to use the justice system to punish innocent people, and the light is shining on them, and they have no defense. I mean, it was lame listening to these Democrats try to defend anything in the Inspector General's report, because all they have is that one little thread where he said he could find no documented case of bias. So, and you know, and we'll talk about the double standard here with Obama, because in the Obama administration, you had thousands and thousands and thousands of children coming across the border, and the same thing being done to the children. We'll talk about that, and no attention given to it in the media. You know, Obama's the one that set this whole thing going. He's the one that set the parameters. This policy, this law that is being enforced is from the Obama era, or it's a law that he used. And he got off scot-free. No media attention whatsoever. Meanwhile, the media is absolutely obsessed with the plight of these children on the border. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in the second hour. All right, let's grab a call from Billy in Wilmington, North Carolina. Billy, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
All right.
I'm doing fine. How are you doing?
Great. About the Hillary or anything else, the Democrats, we know they're guilty. When are we going to put our foot down and start convicting them? Why do we let them escape? I mean, how can they convict anybody for any crime in the United States when everybody in the world knows they're guilty and they're still doing their job, they're still working, and any Republican gets in trouble, they're in jail?
Yeah. Well, you know, I think it's a question we need to ask Jeff Sessions when the dust dies down from this report. We got to ask Jeff Sessions, how come you're in charge of the Department of Justice? How come there are no prosecutions here? You know, Hillary Clinton can be prosecuted. She's not in office any longer. I heard somebody today, a prominent political person, saying, well, there's no way that Hillary is going to get indicted or suffer any penalty whatsoever, just too insulated for political reasons or whatever. Well, how come, Mr. Attorney General, how come, Jeff Sessions, how come you're not prosecuting her? There are prosecutable offenses here, and that's the job of the Inspector General, to provide a report that enables you to decide if there should be some prosecutions. You've got all the evidence that you need. So I think we need to put a little bit of pressure on Jeff Sessions. You have a good question, Billy. How long is this going to go on? And the answer is Jeff Sessions is the one that has the answer to that, and we need to press him until we get some answers. Let's go to Rosemary in Texas. Rosemary, welcome. What's on your mind?
I believe that everybody from the AG to the IG and all in between that has anything to do with covering up for Hillary Clinton or trying to get with Mueller to impeach our president ought to be fired.
Well, Rosemary, I think you got a lot of company out there, and a lot of people love exactly the way you said that. If it's the IG, if it's the AG, we got to go after everybody. So I'm with you, Rosemary. I think they all ought to be cashiered. Any follow-up?
That's right. Yes, and another thing, 3/4 of our representatives up there don't have as much backbone as a snake. You can twist them, turn them, tie them in a knot, and bounce them any which way you want. That's why I said we need term limits so we can get them devils out of there. We want them out.
All right. Okay, Rosemary, that will go down as the call of the day, certainly. Maybe the call of the week, maybe the call of the decade. Yeah. Anyway, Rosemary, I appreciate that. We may have to find a way to preserve that. All right, thank you, Rosemary. Rosemary, passionate, and right on point. All right, thank you, Rosemary. Let's go to Douglas in Greenville, North Carolina. Douglas, what's on your mind?
Hey, guys. Good afternoon. Appreciate all you're doing for us.
Thank you.
I think what we're looking at right now is an extremely lawless society. Even when Adam and Eve sinned in the Garden of Eden, there was a consequence to poor behavior. And we don't have that in America. We're not showing that to our children. And it's learned behavior. But Adam and Eve were expelled from the Garden of Eden, only with one temptation. We have many, many temptations. But the superfluous laws that we have in America now are the pillow police never coming to your door because you're not allowed to take the pillow and tear off the tag, take off the tags on your mattress, and the DVDs that you see preempting your shows that show a $10,000 fine or jail. People know that even for murder you might just get to serve 1/3 of a sentence. So these kids today, why would they need to respect adults when you're looking at the Oprah Winfreys of the world saying white men need to die? Robert De Niro, F Trump, Samantha Bee saying, Trump's daughter's the K word. We don't even use the C word in North Carolina. That is so harsh a word. We use the K word. I mean, that's filthy. Mm-hmm. All of that right now is just, our worst that we've ever seen. And the sad part about it is these things have been going on in backyards forever. Greed is greed, but we're having it, advertised. It's out there so much. Jeff Sessions is doing absolutely nothing. So when Donald Trump says we need to drain the swamp, I agree with him. We do need to drain the swamp. And I'm previously from Canada. I'm an American citizen now. I'll tell you, I was born and proud to be a Canadian, but I'll be proud to die an American. And for Donald Trump to say, if there was ever a shooting, I'd go in there, I did that. In 1974 in my high school, several kids went into the high school because it's just what you do. It's not anything to do with being an American. It's just being a good citizen. It's taking care of your friends, your family, your neighbors, your relatives. It's just something that just comes natural. And I don't think, we should be looking at Trump being the bad guy, but, they're going to point a bad finger to him anyway. I think what we need to do is look at why we're a lawless society, and we need to have consequences to poor behavior starting at home.
Absolutely right. All right, Douglas, we'll talk a little bit more about some of what you said in the second hour also. Appreciate the call. Very good call. And what Douglas was talking about is just what Trey Gowdy was talking about. It's respect for the rule of law that's the thread that holds society together. If you don't have that, it's chaos and disintegration. All right, let's go to Brian, Colfax, Indiana. Last call of the hour. Brian, what's on your mind? Talk to me.
Hey, Brian, I could talk for hours, but I'll just make my point quick. If you're a homeless mother and father in America and you have children and you're sleeping in a car at a truck stop, the Department of Children and Family Services will take your children. They will pry them from the bosom of their mother and put them in foster care until you either straighten your life out, and if you don't, they'll give them to somebody else. But here, somebody can come from a foreign country, and we hand them the keys to the kingdom.
All right, Brian. Listen, I got to let you go because we're out of time, but you're exactly right. And we do treat the children of inmates and homeless worse than we're treating the children of illegal aliens. Be back for second hour.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
Vice President Mike Pence called the Values Voter Summit the greatest gathering of conservative, pro-family Americans in the nation. The Values Voter Summit in Washington, D.C. is September 21st through the 23rd. Sponsored in part by AFA Action, the summit will encourage and equip you to preserve America's republic. Learn more and register at valuesvotersummit.org. That's valuesvotersummit.org.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio, a ministry of the American Family Association.
This is American Family News. I'm Steve Jordahl. Homeland Security officials say they are still working out the process of reunifying parents with their children after they're separated at the border. Officials say that 2,342 minors were separated from parents who were caught trying to come to the U.S. illegally from May 5th to June 9th. The Trump administration officials have adopted a zero-tolerance policy at the border where they are arresting anyone who crosses that border illegally. Because children cannot go to jail with their parents, they're being separated. You're probably not going to get many Republicans to buy in, but the decision not to prosecute Hillary Clinton for mishandling confidential email when she was Secretary of State was not motivated by political bias on the part of former FBI Director James Comey. That's according to the findings of an internal report released by the Department of Justice Inspector General Michael Horowitz. He testified about this at a House hearing on Capitol Hill today.
With regard to the decision to close the investigation without prosecution, we found no evidence that the conclusions by the prosecutors were the result of improper considerations, including political bias, but rather were exercises of those prosecutors' prosecutorial discretion, an exercise of their prosecutorial discretion, based on their assessment of the facts, the law, and past department practice.
Democrats, as you would expect, are saying that Comey's actions hurt Hillary and helped Donald Trump. The World Health Organization may want to hit the reset button after making gaming disorder a mental health condition. AFN's Chris Woodward reports.
The World Health Organization says gaming disorder is a disease characterized by impaired control over gaming, with increasing priority given to gaming over other activities to the extent that gaming takes precedence over other interests and daily activities. Twyla Brace of Citizens Council for Health Freedom thinks it's the wrong thing to do.
If somebody wanted to, they could look at all sorts of behaviors in the world and decide to make them diagnoses. And here, in this case, they're making it a mental health condition. And mental health conditions can lead to stigmatization. It can lead to people assuming that you're going to be a very expensive worker. It could end up in your medical record, or would end up in your medical record, where it would be there forever as though it were truth.
For gaming disorder to be diagnosed, the World Health Organization says the behavior pattern must be of sufficient severity to result in significant impairment in personal, family, social, educational, occupational, or other important areas of functioning, and would normally have been evident for at least 12 months. That, however, is interesting given the push and growing interest in things such as esports at universities and even the Olympics. Meanwhile, grade schools have been looking at video games as a way to teach science, technology, engineering, and math. I'm Chris Woodward.
The U.S. Food and Drug Administration is expected to decide soon whether to give its first approval to a prescription drug made from the marijuana plant. But parents whose children already use the drug to help control some diseases and illnesses want assurances that existing medical marijuana markets in more than 24 states will not be harmed if the drug called Epidiolex gets approved. Trade tensions between the U.S. and China continue to rise. Fox's John Decker reports from the White House.
Escalating the trade fight with China, President Trump has directed the U.S. Trade Representative's office to begin drawing up a list of $200 billion worth of Chinese goods to hit with a 10% tariff. The tariffs will go into effect, the president said, if China refuses to change its practices. The threat comes just days after the president officially announced that $50 billion worth of Chinese goods would be subject to a new 25% tariff starting July 6th. China retaliated with their own tariffs and have also threatened more. At the White House, John Decker, Fox News.
That burgeoning trade war certainly spooking the markets today. The Dow is off around 350 points in midday trading. For American Family News, I'm Steve Jordahl.
Exposing Washington with Walker Wildman.
So who is responsible for the dysfunction in Washington? That's what we're going to be discussing today.
We have become one of the most litigious societies on the planet.
The goal of this show is to bring clarity to the news coming out of Washington, D.C., and to expose the deception that has plagued our nation's capital for decades.
Exposing Washington.
Each Saturday at 2:30 p.m. Central.
On American Family Radio.
Immigration is the fault and all of the problems that we're having, because we cannot get them to sign legislation. We cannot get them even to the negotiating table. And I say it's very strongly the Democrats' fault.
The number of aliens illegally crossing with children went from 14,000 to 75,000 in just 4 years.
Those who selectively use the Bible to justify this cruelty are ignoring a central tenet of Christianity.
You look at what's happening in Europe, we can't allow that to happen to the United States, not on my watch.
This is the United States of America. It isn't Nazi Germany.
A country without borders is not a country at all.
We do not want to separate children from their parents. We do not want adults to bring children into this country unlawfully either.
I went to a lot of years of Sunday school.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome back to Focal Point, second hour of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Glad to have you in the conversation. No matter how you're here, whether live streaming us on Facebook, whether you are live streaming us on YouTube, you can go to our YouTube channel. You can subscribe. You can hit the little bell in the upper right-hand corner, get a notification every time a brand new live broadcast of Focal Point begins. And you can go to our Facebook page after the program. If you miss it, we record it as we're delivering it, and then it's uploaded to the Facebook page. We publish it with an extensive table of contents so you can find your way around the broadcast. And the broadcast on YouTube is likewise recorded and stored on the YouTube channel. So virtually can function like a podcast for you if you happen to miss the program. We do have podcasts. You can go to the AFR.net page, hit the AFR Talk button, scroll down. You can find the podcast option, and you can go to our Facebook page and click on the Learn More button right on the banner there, and it'll take you right to our podcast page. You might be listening to us on one of our 184 stations that comprise the American Family Radio Network. You may be using the app for the iPhone, the Android, to listen to us on the go. However you're listening to us, we are glad to have you in the conversation. Let's see how we want to start this hour. We're going to really hit the immigration issue pretty hard. Let's see if I got any cleanup to do on this Mueller thing. Rob, do I have a soundbite? Oh, yeah. We got a couple of more Gowdies here. Actually, one more Gowdy clip. This is clip number 9. And remember that the House, one of the controversies is that the House has actually subpoenaed documents from the Department of Justice. Now, I do not know why Jeff Sessions has not ordered these things to be turned over. I do not know why President Trump has not ordered these things to be turned over. They are part of the executive branch. They work at the pleasure of Donald Trump. He can tell them what to do. He can direct them to turn over documents, and they've got a responsibility to do it. So I don't know why he hasn't done it. I don't know why Jeff Sessions hasn't directed his people to turn over these documents. And what they're particularly looking for is the documents that are relevant to how this whole investigation, this Mueller thing, got started. They want to look at the documents that have to do with the FISA request, the request for the initial FISA warrant, and how that got granted, what was behind that. How did this thing ever get started? It's so out of phase with reality and with the truth now. And the documents simply have not been forthcoming. So the Department of Justice, which is under Sessions' control, been stonewalling the DOJ. And remember, the FBI and the Department of Justice, they fancy themselves as independent, but they are not. They're not independent. They are not a fourth branch of Congress. They're part of the executive branch. They're under the authority of the president. All of the executive power in the Constitution is vested in the president. All of the executive power is vested in the president. Now, he can use it to delegate authority, but it all comes from him. He is the sole repository of all of the executive authority in the Constitution. So I don't know why he doesn't use it to get these documents, why Jeff Sessions doesn't use it to give these documents. But anyway, here is Trey Gowdy speaking as the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee. He's on Fox News Sunday, and here's what he had to say.
And Paul made it very clear. There's going to be action on the floor of the House this week if the FBI and DOJ do not comply with our subpoena request. So Rod Rosenstein, Chris Rape, you were in the meeting. You understood him just as clearly as I did. We're going to get compliance, or the House of Representatives is going to use its full arsenal of constitutional weapons to gain compliance. This is too important. It was too important before the IG report. The IG report has even heightened the need for us to understand what happened in 2016. So the new guys can either be part of the cleanup crew or they can be part of the cover-up crew, and I would encourage them to be part of the cleanup crew.
That's a pretty good way to put it. He says, look, these guys that are holding on to these documents, they can be part of the cover-up crew by concealing these documents, hiding them from the public, hiding them from Congress, or they can be part of the cleanup crew. And I think his recommendation is the right one. They ought to be part of the cleanup crew. All right, let's see, make sure I don't have anything else I need to clean up on the Mueller investigation thing. A couple of other you might remember this story. We did it about this communist that was graduated from West Point, and he put communist slogans on his cap and took videos of himself on his shirt. Had a Che Guevara thing on his shirt. Anyway, just an outright communist. Remember, communism is illegal. If you're a communist, a known communist, you are not even allowed to immigrate in the United States. So we can do the same thing, by the way, with Muslims. There's no reason we can't do the same thing with Muslims, because the president has the authority to ban anybody from immigration if he thinks they're detrimental to the interests of America. Well, communism is. Those who follow communism are. Communists are a threat to the security of the United States. They're detrimental. Same thing with Muslims. They can be banned for exactly the same reason. We ban communists because they serve a totalitarian ideology. We can ban Muslims for precisely the same reason. The political ideology they follow is totalitarian. It is authoritarian. It is fundamentally contradictory to the way we have, the founders established our frame of government to work. Anyway, that West Point grad, his name was Spencer Rapone. He's now been cashiered. He has been drummed out of the Army with a other than honorable discharge. I guess they don't have a dishonorable discharge anymore. It's just other than honorable. But that's what this is. This was a dishonorable discharge. So before the ink was dry on his expulsion letter, he was out of there. All right, let's see. Back to this thing. Well, we'll get into this on the immigration deal. The constitutionality of Obamacare might be revisited this fall, and there's a reason for this. I think it's actually unconstitutional right now by law, because remember that Congress, the Republican Congress, they eliminated the mandate. There's no longer a mandate that you have to buy insurance or you can be penalized. And remember, John Roberts used tortured logic to say, well, that's justified on the grounds of the taxing authority of Congress. They can impose taxes. It's right there in Article 1, Section 8. So I'm going to call this a tax. It's a mandate. It's in order to purchase a product. It's not a tax. But I'm going to call it a tax, because I'm going to do everything in my power to help Obama get this monstrosity called Obamacare enacted into law. But now that the mandate, and it was to justify the mandate. It was the mandate that was the tax. Well, now that the mandate is gone, there's no longer any taxing authority that's bestowed on Congress on the part of the existing Obamacare. They can impose this mandate. That's a tax. They can impose taxes. Therefore, this whole thing falls to the ground. So I believe it's going to be revisited, and we might see a different outcome in the fall. All right, let's see a couple of media items while we're waiting for the end of this segment to start into the immigration stuff. Pew Survey did a survey, and they discovered that 26% of the American people cannot identify the difference between fact and opinion. And you wonder why fake news survives? Well, that is the reason. We'll be right back. Focal Point, American Family Radio. Stay with us.
Here's Twyla Brace, president of CCHF, with today's Health Freedom Minute.
The Affordable Care Act is a wage and wealth transfer system. Almost 60% of the combined revenue of the top 5 health plans comes from Medicare and Medicaid. Their combined revenue has more than doubled since Obamacare became law. The year the law passed, their combined revenue from Medicare and Medicaid was $92.5 billion. 6 years later, their revenue was $213 billion. So, for whom was the ACA passed? Not the sick or the uninsured. While we're all penalized with mandates, high premiums, and new ACA taxes, health plans haul in boatloads of our cash. Let's repeal the law.
Learn more about protecting your healthcare choices. Sign up for the CCHF Weekly E-News Update at cchfreedom.org. That's cchfreedom.org.
Here's some great news. If you missed the deadline to sign up for a healthcare plan, or more importantly, if you signed up for a plan that you're just not happy with, you still have a choice. It's called Medi-Share. Medi-Share is a Christian healthcare sharing program. It's been around for 25 years. They have hundreds of thousands of members all across the country. And get this, over the years, Medi-Share members have shared more than $2.5 billion of each other's medical bills. Best of all, you could save a lot of money with Medi-Share. The typical savings for a family is about $500 a month. Your savings may be less or more, but think about what you could do with that extra money every month. So if you think you're stuck with a high-cost health plan that doesn't have much to offer, think again. You can join Medi-Share anytime, so call them today and check it out. Here's the number to find out more. There's no pressure. They're super easy to talk to. Just hit *345. That's *345. *345.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Good to have you in the conversation. We're going to shift our focus now in the second hour to this immigration fracas that is taking place. Interesting story. Let me start off with this. This is completely unrelated to immigration, but the story just kind of struck me. There are 2 brothers, twins, who died on the same day. They died on June 19. They died on D-Day in 1944. But one of them was unknown. They never recovered his body until 1961. Some French divers discovered his body in the vessel in which he sank and died. Their ship hit an underwater mine, and it took them all to the bottom of the sea. The one brother was recovered, buried with full military honors in the military cemetery at Normandy. But the second twin brother, was not recovered until 1961, and he wasn't identified until 2017. So he's going to be buried next to his brother at the cemetery, which I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of it, but it's an immaculate field of crosses, Stars of David, majestic view of the English Channel and Omaha Beach. So they will be buried now side by side after 74 years. So I found the second body in the vessel's radio room where he was apparently trapped. All right, let's talk about the immigration. Now, this whole deal with the kids thing, the media has just lost its collective mind over these children. I mean, they've gone literally insane, like lunatic insane, over bringing us pictures of children separated from their parents. I mean, one reporter played a tape of children crying at one of these detention centers, children crying in the press room to try to distract everybody from what was going on. So we want to get to the bottom of what that is all about. And here's an example of the way the media has gone completely lunatic. They spent in 6 days 176 minutes of coverage on these separated kids. That's almost 30 minutes a day. And remember, their broadcasts are only 30 minutes. So you got 3 networks broadcasting 30 minutes a day. Well, maybe they've gone to an hour in some of them. I don't know because I never watch them. But between ABC, CBS, and NBC, they spent 94 minutes on detention policy. They spent almost 3 hours, 176 minutes, of emotional segments that included pictures of crying children and anger from correspondents and pundits alike. So CBS had 73 minutes, NBC 67, ABC 36 minutes. They could not help themselves. And, you know, when you've got a populace out there, this is according to Pew, only 26%. What they did is they gave the people that were in this survey, they gave them 5 opinion statements and 5 factual statements. Now, one statement they gave them was spending on Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid make up the largest portion of the U.S. federal budget. Is that a fact or is it an opinion? Well, it's a fact. So if they recognize it as a fact, then they would say it's a fact. And there were 5 opinion statements like democracy is the greatest form of government. Well, that's an opinion statement. We happen to believe it. Well, Republican form of democracy, anyway, is the greatest form of government. But other people are free to disagree. You know, the communist that just got thrown out of the army today, he disagrees. Muslims disagree with us. Their form of political structure is antithetical completely to America's system of government. They should not be allowed to immigrate to this country. So anyway, when you got only 26% of the American people can differentiate between fact and opinion, it's no wonder that the media can get away with this kind of obsessive coverage. You know, this is a related story to accuracy of the media, but there's a fact checker for the New Yorker. New Yorker, real Tony publication, east side of New York. This is a magazine that's read by the elitists, and they have a fact checker for the New Yorker. They make their bones. They say that they fact check everything. Well, I had a large profile in the New Yorker done by Jane Mayer, one of their main correspondents, and it had 15, I counted them up, had 15 errors of fact in it. And I should know these things because it was about me. So the New Yorker is not as fact-centric as they claim to be, and they have a fact checker who is educated at Harvard. And he fact-checked a picture, and he slandered in the process a Marine veteran. He said, this guy has a Nazi tattoo on his arm. And so that got a lot of traction. This tweet that he sent out about Justin Gertner is the soldier that's involved in this. And the guy that sent it out was a reporter by the name of Talia Lavin. It's a she. And she implied that he had the Nazi symbol of an iron cross inked on his elbow. Well, it's not. It's a Titan II symbol that stands for the platoon he served in when he was in Afghanistan. And the writing on his right arm is the Spartan Creed, which is about protecting family and children. Now, this guy, get this, lost both of his legs and suffered other permanent injuries when an IED exploded during his deployment to the Helmand province in Afghanistan. And now he gets tagged as a Nazi guy by the New Yorker. And their Harvard-educated fact checker missed that. So much. I mean, you can't even trust the fact-checking that the talking snake media does any longer. Well, let's quickly get to some sound bites on the... No. First thing I'm going to do, I meant to go through this story yesterday. I was determined to do it. I did not do it. I'm going to correct my error, and I'm going to go through this story with you today because I didn't do it yesterday, and it's a great story. Rich Lowry wrote it. He's the senior editor or whatever they call him at National Review Online. A lot of never-Trumpers over there, but still a lot of bright people there, and they do good writing. Donald Trump, by the way, this morning lost his temper over wall funding. This is in a budget meeting, and the Congress has only been asked by $2.2 billion by the Trump administration. And Trump says, no, I want all $25 billion. I want the whole deal. I want the full Megillah this year in this year's budget, $25 billion. And he's hot about that. which could mean we may be looking at a veto if he doesn't get his $25 billion. And I hope he does. I hope he does. I hope he vetoes that puppy if he doesn't get the $25 billion he needs to build that border wall. You know why he's not going to get it? Because this budget is going to require 60 votes. You know why? Yeah. Because Mitch McConnell, the spineless Mitch McConnell, has left that obscene pseudo-filibuster, I call it the fake-a-buster, left that in place. So now the Republicans, if they want to pass anything, including a Trump budget, you got to get 9 Democrats to vote with you. Well, there are not 9 Democrats in the known universe who are going to vote for $25 billion for a border wall. Not going to happen. You might be able to get 51 Republicans to do it. You are not going to get 9 Democrats to do it. So, again, another instance where McConnell, and this is squarely on Mitch McConnell, it is his fault that fake-a-buster's still there. He owns that. He owns every last bit of it. They could change the rules today. Ladies and gentlemen, they could change the rule this afternoon and get back to a majority rule for every piece of legislation that comes out of the Senate, which is the way that Congress was designed to run. Now, here is a column by Rich Lowry, and I want to go through it with you. The truth about separating kids. The truth about separating kids. And Lowry says, this outrage obscures more than it illuminates. I mean, there is so much outrage now. There's so much dust they're throwing up in the air. There's such a cacophony of complaining that it obscures the simple facts on the ground. Even Sessions' home church in Alabama, it's a Methodist church, they've signed a formal complaint against Jeff Sessions, a member of their own church, because of what they think is this grotesque separation of children from their families. The cable news outlets, they have 22 times they compared the immigration policy being enforced right now to the Holocaust and to slavery, to World War II era crimes on the part of Nazi Germany. Well, there's one major difference, and people have pointed this out. In Nazi Germany, World War II, they were trying to keep Jews in. What we are trying to do is keep criminals out. Those are two major differences, no comparison whatsoever. But they love those Nazi comparisons. Donald Trump increasingly looks like Hitler in Germany. Donald Trump is turning this nation into Nazi Germany and turning these detention centers into concentration camps. That is an unhinged comment from Dave Jacobson of CNN. Joe Scarborough, children, listen to this, are being marched away to the showers. Wow. Just like the Nazis said they were taking people to the showers. It is a trick. Chris Matthews couldn't hold off for even a minute before evoking concentration camps while hosting Hardball on Monday. So that's the meme that is out there. This is Donald Trump as Hitler.
Have you seen heard the new thing that they've been running all morning, the audio of the kid crying?
I haven't heard that particular one.
Yeah, that's sad. But I mean, how hard do you think it would be to find a kid crying in that kind of situation? Well, anyways,
yeah, and there isn't a single one of us that doesn't think that's sad. Yeah, not a single one of us that thinks that's unacceptable. But what we do is we place the problem where it belongs, on their parents. It's their parents that created this situation where these kids were being separated from them. The parents did this. They know the immigration laws. They know what the rules are. Mexico has stiffer immigration laws than we do. They know all this stuff. So they know if they cross the border between ports of entry that they're going to be prosecuted. Because the DHS director said, look, make no mistake about it. You cross our border illegally, we are going to prosecute you. We got a couple. Here's an example of the Nazi comparison. Let's go to clip 7. You'll hear first from Michael Hayden, former chief of the CIA, and then you'll hear from our good friend Dianne Feinstein from California.
I walked down that railroad siding where the families were separated, and that's why I used that picture. Now look, I know we're not Nazi Germany, all right? But there is a commonality there.
This is the United States of America. It isn't Nazi Germany. And there's a difference. And we don't take children from their parents until now.
Now that is absolutely, flatly wrong. You know who took parents from their children, children from their parents? Barack Hussein Obama. I'm looking at a piece here from lawandcrime.com. Obama's immigration agency separated children from their families too. Long before the Trump administration, the administration of Barack Obama ramped up a program with a sometimes similar effect. Once an immigrant is caught attempting to cross the border without documentation, they are detained, separated from their families, who are deported from a completely different port of entry. Parents, fathers, separated from their families. That's Barack Obama did that back in 2000.
Are you a responsible person who finds yourself growing deeper and deeper in credit card debt and you're not sure how to fix the problem? Then get ready for a toll-free number that will put you on a path to financial recovery. Trinity Debt Management is a nonprofit organization that will consolidate your accounts into one easy-to-manage monthly payment, put a stop to late fees and over-limit charges, and reduce your interest rates by as much as 60%. You'll save thousands and become debt-free for keeps. It's not a loan. It's a smart way to relieve your stress, meet your obligations, and preserve your self-respect. If your debt has you down, we should talk. Gather up your bills and call this toll-free number for a free, no-obligation debt analysis. 1-800-788-1813. That's 1-800-788-1813. If you're in debt and you need help, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
Hi, I'm Will Addison.
And I'm Miki.
From Airing the Addisons on Urban Family Talk.
We'd like to invite you to the Marriage, Family, and Life Conference coming up August 17th and 18th.
The list of speakers is amazing. We'll have Ryan Baumberger of the Radiance Foundation, Dr. Clarence Schuler of Building Lasting Relationships, Abraham Hamilton III, Pastor Bert Harper and his wife Jan, Stacy Washington, Lonnie Poindexter, Pastor Dexter Sanders, and we'll be there too.
There's a direct attack by the enemy on marriage and family, and babies in the womb are treated like political footballs instead of life. We want to encourage and equip the body of Christ to fight for the restoration of the family. If we can get our families on track, a lot of society's problems could be solved. The Marriage, Family, and Life Conference is from Urban Family Communications, a division of the American Family Association. You can learn more and register at urbanfamilytalk.com.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Video segments of today's program will be posted at afr.net and on the Focal Point Facebook page. You'll also find the best collection of Brian's resources on our Facebook page. If you're on Twitter, be among the very first every morning to find out what the day's show will be about. Just follow Brian at Brian J. Fisher.
Brian J. Fisher.
Welcome back to Focal Point American Family Radio. We are talking about parents being separated from their children, which I think we all agree is an agonizing situation. We hate to see that. We hate to see children separated from their parents. So when you see something like that, it's a heartbreaking, agonizing thing to see. What's the question that you want answered? The question that you want to answer is, who is to blame for this? Who put these children in this horrible, agonizing place? And the answer is their parents did this to them. You're looking for somebody to blame. Don't look at Donald Trump. Don't look at Jeff Sessions. Don't look at Kirsten Nielsen. They had a DHS. Look no further than their parents. They did this intentionally and willfully. I don't mean they intended to put their kids in this position, but they intentionally did the thing. They broke the law intentionally. The result is separation from their parents. You know, Jeff was showing me a picture, and the media just buying all these lies. Remember, they can't tell the difference between fact and fiction. The picture of children in cages. Yeah. And again, it was designed to evoke all the sympathy for this terrible thing about these. So apparently, the picture was to try to create the impression that this is what was going on at the border. It turns out it was from a protest, like in front of a city hall somewhere.
Exactly.
So they set up these cages and put children there, and then a picture's taken, separated completely from its context, and everybody thinks then this is what happens to kids on the border.
There was some adults in there holding up protest signs inside a cage as there was a speaker on the steps of the Capitol. But they zoomed in and cropped the picture because apparently they had a little kid in there with them, and he didn't like it.
Didn't like being in there. So, anyway, here was the Obama era deal. The Obama administration, this is according to lawandcrime.com, drastically increased the use of a program called ATEP, A-T-E-P, that stands for Alien Transfer Exit Program. Alien Transfer Exit Program. So the aliens are transferred and then they exit the country. So here's the way it worked. Many male Mexican nationals who are detained trying to cross the border often come with their families in tow. When ATEP was used, the men are captured, this is under Obama now, and taken thousands of miles away, while their wives, partners, and children are placed in immigrant detention centers. Again, this is under Obama. Why don't we know about that? Because of the talking snake media. They lie to you, ladies and gentlemen. They lie to you with the pictures they show, and they lie to you with the narratives they create. So eventually, the men are released into vastly different parts of Mexico. They could be released into Mexico 1,200 miles from where their wives and children are. Their families are more likely to be deported near the original point of attempted entry. So, so that happened a lot, and this was under Obama. Here's Angelo Guisado, a staff attorney with the Center for Constitutional Rights, talking about the situation under Obama. These places where the families were held, the children are held, are torturous. Policies include banning mothers and children from sleeping together and turning lights on and off every hour to ensure sleep deprivation. Goes on to say that very often families are separated and sent to cities far away from each other. So if you're going to blame Trump for this, you might as well go ahead and blame President Obama for exactly the same thing.
By the way, just did a little more research on that audio, and there's some questions about this. The networks have been running this audio of the crying child at the thing, but that audio was turned into an attorney, and there's been nobody has confirmed the authenticity of it yet. So, I mean, it may or may not be true, but the networks didn't care. They just went ahead and they've been running it out of convenience for their narrative.
Because they got a narrative, it fits their narrative, doesn't matter whether it's true or not. And by the way, all of this concern on the part of the left for children, I mean, this is so bogus it makes you want to vomit. Because they want us to think they care so much about these children. But ladies and gentlemen, they only care about children who are lucky enough to get born. Before they're born, they believe in chopping them into little tiny bits. That's how much the left cares about children. So don't believe it. It's just all bogus. There's no genuine concern for these children there. It's just all fake. It's all a photo op to push their narrative that Trump is mean, Republicans are mean. We're the only ones that care about people. Now, in this piece by Mark Lowry, he says this in paragraph number 3, the Trump administration isn't changing the rules. These are the same rules that were in effect when the Obama administration was in place. And remember, Romans 13 says you obey the law. And that's what this is all about. Left doesn't want to do it. Separation happens, listen to this now very carefully, separation of a child from parents happens only if officials find that the adult is falsely claiming to be the child's parent, or is a threat to the child, or is put into criminal proceedings. Under those circumstances, the child will be separated from the adult. If they find out that the claim is false, that they aren't father and son or mother and daughter, they find that claim is false, then they take away the parent that's telling the lie. If they think the adult is a threat to the child, like they suspect he might be a child trafficker, for instance, looking to sell that child in the sex trade industry, you can separate the child from the father. And if the adult is being put into criminal proceedings for what? For breaking the law. What law did they break? The immigration law. Broke the law. Crossed the border illegally. Crossed between ports of entry. And therefore, that's a criminal act. And remember, Kirstjen Nielsen, the head of ICE, said, we are going to prosecute, or DHS, you break the law, you cross the border illegally, we are going to prosecute you. Now, the past practice under Obama was to give a free pass to any adult that was part of a family unit. So they would break the law themselves by giving a pass to adults that were part of a family unit. They wouldn't separate out the parents and prosecute them for breaking the law. So people learned this is how we can get across. If you cross as a family, they won't touch you. You're in, ollie ollie oxen free. But the Trump policy is to prosecute all adults who break the law. And that's what the policy ought to be. Now, one time of illegal entry is a misdemeanor. Illegal re-entry, you do it 2 times, that is a felony. Now, what?
I have a quick question for you. Say they get caught crossing the border with their children. They're processed, or they can plead guilty, right? They can plead guilty, and then they would be deported together with their family.
Yeah, their sentence would be time served, the amount of time they spend in detention. They plead guilty, reunited with their families, and home they go.
So if they want to fight it or plead not guilty, then they're the ones causing the separation.
Yeah, they're causing the extended separation.
Right.
And if they want to try to apply for asylum, it takes time to do that, and they have to be in detention while their case for asylum is being reviewed.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to be kept in custody for that. So again, that's their decision.
Yes.
And it may delay their reunion with their family. So anyway, here's what happens when a migrant is prosecuted for illegal entry. I'm just going to use he in the generic sense here. He is taken into custody by U.S. Marshals. In no circumstances anywhere in the United States do the Marshals care for the children of people they take into custody. They can't do it. They are too busy prosecuting and detaining criminals. They don't have time to provide child care. So the child is taken into the custody of HHS, Health and Human Services, who cares for them at temporary shelters. So the marshals are doing their job to detain criminals. HHS is doing its job to provide care for children who are temporarily estranged from their parents. Now, the criminal proceedings, if you are caught crossing the border, are exceptionally short. The migrants, getting back to Jeff's question, typically plead guilty. They are then sentenced to time served, the amount of time they spent that day in detention, typically all on the same day, and after this they are returned to the custody of ICE. If the adult wants to go home, then it's relatively simple. The adult is reunited quickly with his child or children. Family is returned home as a unit. There's only a very brief separation. If you break the law and you cop to it, you go home the same day. You're reunited with your family the same day. If you're in there longer, your family's in there longer, it's because of a decision that you yourself have made. Now, it's more of an issue if the adult files an asylum claim. And if parents go to a legal point of entry and file an asylum claim, they're not separated from their children. They're kept together. But if you cross the border illegally and then decide you're going to try to apply for asylum, that is a different deal. There you will be separated from your children. And the adults are almost certainly going to be detained longer than the government is allowed to hold their children. There are laws about how long the government can hold a child in its care. This is because of something called the Flores Consent Decree from 1997. It says that unaccompanied children can only be held 20 days. A ruling by the Ninth Circuit extended this 20-day limit to children who come as part of family units. So even if we want to hold a family unit together, we are forbidden by the law from doing so. That consent decree is from 1997. Who was president then? Bill Clinton. What party did he belong to? Democrat. This is a law that was signed into law by a Democrat president. You can't reunite the family even if you want to. So the clock ticking on the time the government can hold a child will almost always run out before an asylum claim is settled. So the time runs out and the asylum claim has not been settled. The child can no longer be held in detention by law. Something's got to be done with the child. The adult's waiting for the asylum issue to be settled. The migrant in that circumstances is allowed 10 days to seek an attorney, and there may be continuances, other complications, so the request for asylum could lead to extended stay in custody for the adult. So this creates the choice of either releasing the adults and children together into the country, depending upon pending the adjudication of the asylum claim, but they never come back. You can say, okay, you can go, but you got to promise to come back for the court date. They never come back. So you can't do that. It just doesn't work. or you can hold the adults and release the children. Those are the only two options. If the adult is held, HHS places the child with a responsible party in the U.S., ideally or typically a relative. They try to place them with family members, if at all possible, because most migrants are going to have friends and family here. Now, if Flores didn't exist, the government would be very constrained in how many family units it can accommodate. ICE has only about 3,000 family spaces in its shelters. It's limited in its overall space at the border. That means whatever the Trump administration would prefer to do, many adults are still swiftly released because they've got no place to put them. We'll be right back with more and with your calls. Stay with us, Focal Point, American Family Radio.
Hey family, this is Lauren from Living Life with Lauren, and I want you to know just how much I appreciate you, and I count it an honor and a privilege to bring you interviews weekly with godly speakers, teachers, and authors that point us all to a closer walk with Jesus. Thank you for listening, telling your friends, downloading our podcast, and of course connecting with me on Facebook, Living Life with Lauren, and Lauren Kitchen Stewart. I would love to hear from you. We're heard every Saturday evening at 8 Central Time on American Family Radio. Join us.
Solomon says that wisdom is something we should be grateful for because it gives perspective to us. And wisdom helps us to understand that prosperity is not the end all of everything, that if you have prosperity and you don't have the wisdom to enjoy it, you're better off to be poor.
Join Dr. David Jeremiah for his series Searching for Heaven on Earth, next time on Turning Point.
5:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
Isn't that a beautiful sound? That sonogram holds the sound of a baby's heartbeat. Hi, I'm Jim Stanley, General Manager for AFR. We're partnering with the Ministry of Preborn to help save babies' lives. Preborn partners with pregnancy centers throughout America in helping abortion-minded women choose life through ultrasound. By letting a mother hear her baby's heartbeat and see her baby in the womb, she will choose life 80% of the time. Ultrasound is a game changer. For $140, you can provide 5 ultrasounds. All gifts are tax deductible, and 100% of your gift goes to saving babies. You can save a baby's life right here in America by donating to Preborn. To donate, dial pound 250 and say keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. Or donate securely at preborn.com. That's preborn.com. Your love can save a life.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Focal Point, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome to the last segment of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Talking about the immigration issue today. Give us a call, 888-589-8840. If you got something to contribute on the immigration issue, question or observation, 888-589-8840 is the number to call, 888-589-8840. You know, most of these immigrants are going to claim that they've got a credible fear of persecution, but they don't. Only about 20% of the asylum claims are actually granted because when they investigate them, they find out that there's no basis for that. And you have to do that because otherwise everybody will simply claim asylum, and they're even taught the words to use. I mean, the coyotes and the smugglers, they will tell them the words to use. As soon as you get in their hands, here's what you say to make your claim for asylum. But if you have a credible fear of persecution, there are legitimate ways to pursue that claim, and you don't have to enter the United States illegally. You can make an asylum claim in the first country where you feel safe. You can do it in Mexico. You're in Guatemala, you get to Mexico, you can file for asylum in Mexico, or you can show up at a port of entry on the border of the United States and put your claim in there rather than crossing the border illegally. You know, in April, the New York Times reported that some migrants have admitted that they brought their children not only to remove them from danger, but because they believed it would cause the authorities to release them from custody sooner. So what are these parents doing? They're using their kids as bargaining chips. I mean, that is just grotesque. Just objectifying their kids and using them, putting their kids at risk for their own selfish purposes. Others, according to the New York Times, have admitted to posing falsely with children who are not their own. Border Patrol officials say that such instances of fraud are increasing. According to azcentral.com, it is common to have parents entrust their children to a smuggler as a favor or for profit, meaning their kid is going to be trafficked, sold in some way, probably for sex trafficking, and the parents participate in that. So it's a smuggler that shows up at the border with the kid, says this child is mine, but the child is not. You know, so even the Trump administration wants to keep these families together, and that, from what we're seeing, is entirely in the control of the adults. In other words, if you want to keep your family together, plead guilty. You were caught red-handed, plead guilty. You're sentenced for time served, and you go home that day. You get reunited with your family, and you're heading home that day. Let's play two Donald Trump clips very quickly, and then we'll get to your phone calls. Clip number 2. This is Donald Trump talking about his commitment to do something about immigration.
If I might, I just wanted to make a brief statement on immigration and what's happening. And I'll say it very honestly, and I'll say it very straight. Immigration is the fault in all of the problems that we're having, because we cannot get them to sign legislation. We cannot get them even to the negotiating table. And I say it's very strongly the Democrats' fault. They're they're really obstructionist, and they are obstructing. The United States will not be a migrant camp, and it will not be a refugee holding facility. Won't be. You look at what's happening in Europe, you look at what's happening in other places, we can't allow that to happen to the United States, not on my watch.
Here is clip number 2.
But just remember, a country without borders is not a country at all. We need borders, we need security, we need safety, we have to take care of our people. You take a look at the death and destruction that's been caused by people coming into this country without going through a process. We want a merit-based immigration system so that Boeing and Lockheed and all of the people, Grumman, all of the people that are here today, the heads of every company, so that you can hire people on a merit base. You know, they're coming in, they're people that came on merit, not based on a lottery or not people that snuck across the border. And they could be murderers and thieves and so much else. So we want a safe country, and it starts with the borders. And that's the way it is.
That is the way it is. Well, let's go to the phones. Let's go to Jimmy in Lafayette, Louisiana. Jimmy, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hello, Brian. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good, man. Listen, I just wanted to talk about this immigration thing. I lived in Guatemala for 8 years, and I was there about 2 years ago. And that border crossing down there, the main border crossing between Guatemala and Mexico, the part on Guatemala is called San Marcos, that department, and on Mexico side it's called Chiapas. And the little river that goes through there is the Suchiate River. That's where they're crossing. The Mexicans don't have this big wall and all this security stopping them, and that's why they're making it to our border.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they don't have that. I was watching them. In fact, I was with my Guatemalan buddy, and they were floating across on inner tubes across that little river. And they're just floating across by large numbers of people and walking straight across that border. So the Mexicans are really not watching their border like I know a lot of people think. I mean, this was 2 years ago when I was down there visiting, but what I could see, man, they're just flowing into Mexico.
Well,
but
and it's
no way to. I'm sorry?
Go ahead. Finish your thought.
Well, I was going to say there's really no way to vet these people. We knew some people. Our wife's from Guatemala. We knew some people when we lived in Guatemala. They were married. Okay, we married. We knew them. We'd see them all the time. They happened to move to Lafayette, Louisiana, where we're from. And she claims now that he's her cousin, not her husband. And because of that, she's a single mom. They have 2 kids under the age of 18. She gives $300 a month for each one, which is $600. And she's always telling us how, oh man, the $600 almost pays our rent.
Uh-huh.
You know?
Yeah.
It's so disgusting to hear that.
Yeah. Well, and see, Mexico has a financial stake in getting these immigrants into Mexico and through Mexico and into the United States. They don't want them staying in Mexico because they're a burden, because they're poverty-stricken, they have no resources of their own, so they're going to be a burden wherever they wind up. So Mexico says, let's get them into the United States, get them out of our hair, into the U.S., and if they've got relatives here in Mexico, they'll start sending money from the U.S. back to Mexico, and we benefit from that. Our economy benefits from all of these remittances that are flowing from the United States back home into Mexico. All right, Jimmy, a good call. I appreciate that. Let's grab a call from Bill in Billington, West Virginia. Bill, what's on your mind?
I'm right.
Hey.
Listen, I want to make a comment about the hearings yesterday.
Uh-huh.
Lindsey Graham, I don't know if you saw him or not.
Did not.
But I'm going to tell you, he had Horowitz squirming in his seat. I was surprised. He really did a good job. So if you get a chance, you turn to see Lindsey Graham's performance yesterday.
All right. Have to look that up.
He was good.
All right.
He surprised me.
Okay.
So that's all I wanted to say.
Okay, great. Thanks, Bill. And Lindsey Graham, he gets beated on the right target. He can be pretty good. Let's go to Fran, Columbus, Ohio. What's on your mind, Fran?
Hi. Well, for the caller two callers back, my first question to him is, you could be my best friend, but if you're not doing right, why didn't you turn them in? That's your job, to turn people in that aren't doing right there, number one. But number two, as far as the left, you're like, oh, they care so much about the kids. No, it's just another vote for them.
Yep.
And as far as talking about Nazi Germany, what's more Nazi than what the former communist Muslim that was in the White House enforcing penalties on us if we don't mandatory insurance? What's more communist than that?
Yep. Yeah, that sure is a socialist policy, and I think there's no doubt that President Obama, I don't know if you go so far to say he was a communist, but socialism is just a way station. I mean, it's just one step short from full-blown communism, and there's no question that Barack Obama was a socialist. And Fran is right. I mean, for the Democrats, they don't see illegal aliens. They don't have any compassion for them. This is not about compassion for Democrats. It's about votes. Because 75% of of Mexican immigrants who come into this country wind up voting Democratic when they get the chance. In California, all you got to do is show up at DMV, you get a driver's license, and you get registered to vote, even though you're illegal and have absolutely no right to vote in this country. That's what the Democrats are all about. Muslims are like 63% likely to vote Democrat, only 16% to vote conservative. So Muslim immigrants represent another voting bloc for the Democrats, and that's what it's about for them. They'll try to fool you into thinking it's about some kind of phony compassion that they've got, but it's not about that at all. It is about political power. It's about votes, and that is it. Let's go to Ruth in Pontotoc, Mississippi. Ruth, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hey, Brother Brian, I know I just called the other day, but this morning I'm making a peach pie, and I had to tell you this and share it with some others. But, and I know that you're grateful and others are out there and can appreciate this. True Christians can appreciate this, you and the other ones, and can be most grateful because I am as well. Of course, God does everything, right? He's the one that opens our hearts and our eyes to see the truth of anything. If he didn't, none of us, we'd all be blind. So praise, glory, and honor to God that we see, and we just have to pray for these people that are blinded that he'll open their eyes. But to me, Brother Brian, what I don't understand, why don't they just send these people back instead of letting them, after they come in, just send them back to where they came from?
Well, and a lot more of that is happening than you might think. Because that is what ought to happen. If they get apprehended at the border, you just deport them immediately. I mean, right now, they don't have any constitutional rights to an attorney. They don't have rights to due process, none of that, because they're not citizens of the United States. So you can turn them around and send them right back home because they have broken our laws and therefore can be punished immediately. All right, Ruth, got to let you go. Thank you for the call. Melba down in Jackson, I do not have time for your call, but Melba's point, I think, is going to be, that if we mess up and get sent to jail, we can't take our kids with us. Our kids get separated from us if we commit a felony crime. Same thing happens at the border. It's no different from a moral standpoint. Well, that's it for today. God bless you all. We're fighting a winnable war. See you tomorrow.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.